The moment Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez told President Trump on live television that he represented everything wrong with capitalism, she committed the disastrous error that so many socialists seem to make. She completely neglected to remember she was attacking a titan of industry who actually comprehends economics, while she could not articulate the source of $93 trillion for her Green New Deal. Fox News had organized the Great American Debate between capitalism and socialism as the political spectacle of the year, or perhaps even the decade. The concept had originated as an offhand remark during a morning show segment asking if it wouldn't be incredible to see Trump debate AOC on the economy. The audience enthusiasm was so immense that within 2 days, the network had fully committed to making the event a reality. They contacted both camps, offering prime-time coverage and promoting it as the dialogue the country desperately needed to hear. To the astonishment of everyone, both parties agreed to the terms. AOC's advisors had persuaded her this was the perfect opportunity to educate the Fox News audience about democratic socialism and prove she was more than a viral sensation. They spent weeks preparing her by bringing in economists to explain the Nordic model and practicing answers for every possible attack. They prepared talking points regarding wealth inequality and climate change, while coordinating with friendly media outlets to ensure sympathetic coverage. They were certain that her charisma and passionate advocacy would win over viewers who had never heard the socialist argument presented correctly. However, they had fundamentally misjudged both their own candidate and her opponent. Trump's team had agreed immediately for the simple reason that he had been waiting years for this exact moment. He had watched her spread economic fallacies on social media while living in luxury and proposing trillion-dollar programs without a funding plan. He had watched her drive Amazon out of New York, destroying 25,000 jobs only to call it a victory. He had observed her promoting the Green New Deal without being able to explain basic cost projections. He had watched her become the face of progressive economics, despite demonstrating a total lack of economic literacy. Now, he was going to dismantle her arguments on live television in front of 20 million people. AOC had agreed because she believed she could school Fox News viewers about democratic socialism, and she had prepared her points about Nordic countries and corporate greed. She wore her most expensive designer outfit, which was ironic given the topic, and she had rehearsed her narrative about being a girl from the Bronx. She was ready to go viral with clips of her taking down Trump, but she was walking into a trap. Trump agreed because he never backs down from a fight, and he brought something she had not anticipated. He arrived with a calculator and her tax returns, along with photos of her luxury lifestyle and the cost breakdown of the Green New Deal her office tried to hide. He had done his homework and prepared his evidence to give America the economics lesson Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez had somehow missed despite her degree. What transpired over the next 90 minutes would expose the biggest fraud in progressive politics and reduce a social media superstar to a humiliated backbencher. If you have ever wanted to see what happens when someone who built an empire meets someone who bartended and thinks it qualifies her for economics, this is it. Wait until Trump produces her complaint about her $174,000 salary at minute 38, because her facial expression reveals everything. The Fox News studio in Manhattan was packed beyond its legal capacity as security turned away hundreds trying to enter. The audience of 500 was evenly split between Trump supporters in MAGA hats and AOC supporters wearing Tax the Rich shirts, with a small section of undecided voters in the middle. The set was designed for maximum drama, with 2 podiums facing each other and massive screens looming behind them to display evidence. Sean Hannity sat at a moderator desk between them, looking like a man who knew he was about to witness either the greatest debate or the greatest disaster in television history. Backstage, the contrast was perfect, as Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez's green room buzzed with frantic activity. 8 staffers were coordinating social media strategy, while a communications director prepared viral clip ideas, and 2 economists tried to help her understand actual economics. A stylist applied the finishing touches, while a crisis team stood by ready to launch narratives about attacks on women of color if the night went poorly. AOC sat reviewing flashcards filled with data on inequality and Nordic healthcare, certain her massive following would secure her victory. Trump's green room told a completely different story, as it was just him with his notes and a Diet Coke. There were no frantic aides or spin doctors, and no economists explaining the basics, because it was just Trump being Trump. He checked his talking points while refining his punchlines and smirking at what he was about to do to the social media star of the left. He had built Manhattan skyscrapers and spent 50 years navigating the New York real estate jungle before winning the White House when no one thought he could. Now he was ready to school a former bartender turned congresswoman on Economics Live on television. A producer called out 2 minutes until airtime, and Trump stood to fix his trademark red tie. He walked toward the stage with the swagger of a man who has played this game 1,000 times and never lost. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez stepped out first, to a roar of applause from her supporters and a polite nod from the rest of the room. She was wearing a cream designer suit that likely cost more than most Americans pay in monthly rent, which was a detail Trump was sure to pounce on. She waved to the cameras with influencer precision and flashed the bright smile that fueled thousands of Instagram posts before taking her spot at the podium. 30 seconds later, President Trump entered to an ovation so massive it literally caused the cameras to vibrate. The cheering continued for nearly a minute, forcing Sean Hannity to signal the crowd for silence. Wearing his classic dark suit and red tie, Trump waved to point out a few familiar faces and settled in with the easy confidence of a man who has owned much bigger stages. Sean Hannity opened the night by outlining the format, which included moderator questions and rebuttals, with audience questions at the finish. He stressed the need for deep discussion and mutual respect, but that respect would last about 90 seconds. Sean began by asking Congresswoman Ocasio-Cortez to explain her advocacy for democratic socialism, but she cut him off to pivot to her planned attack. She stated that before they talked theory, it was important to address what they were actually debating. Her voice took on that earnest and slightly breathless tone that works wonders on social media as she turned to look Trump in the eye. She declared President Trump the poster child for everything wrong with capitalism, including greed and exploitation and the hoarding of wealth. She claimed he was born into wealth and stepped on workers to get ahead, and was now protecting a system that failed regular Americans. The crowd began to murmur as she went on the attack from the very start. She argued that we need democratic socialism like they have in Nordic countries where healthcare is a right, and billionaires pay their fair share. She said working families finally deserve a shot at the American dream that capitalism has stolen from them. A bartender trying to lecture a billionaire on economics was going to be interesting, and a massive grin spread across Trump's face. She had just handed him the perfect opening, and he asked if he should call her Alexandria, or if she preferred Sandy, since that is her real name. Trump spoke in his thick Queen's accent, which cut through the room as the audience broke into laughter. He had already scored a point, but agreed to talk about capitalism versus socialism because it is one of his favorite subjects. He stated that he loves the subject because he has actually lived it by building real things like skyscrapers and businesses that provide jobs for thousands of people. He paused to let the moment hang there before asking her a question about her economics degree from Boston University. He noted it is a very expensive school that likely cost her parents $250,000 for those 4 years. AOC started to look a bit uneasy and tried to say her education was not the point. But Trump interrupted cheerfully. He insisted that since she has that degree, she ought to understand the basics of the economy and asked her to explain something. He pulled out a tablet and tapped it so footage started playing on the big screens behind them. The clip showed AOC in an interview saying with total sincerity that unemployment is low only because everyone has 2 jobs and people are working 80 hours a week. Trump let the whole video play through, then turned to her with a look of mock bewilderment. He told her honestly, that is not how unemployment works, and not even close. He explained that unemployment simply measures the percentage of people who are out of work, and if someone has 2 jobs, they are counted as one employed person. He shifted his attention toward the crowd and pointed out that this woman has an economics degree, yet does not grasp how unemployment is calculated. The room exploded in laughter, and even some of her own supporters looked visibly uneasy. Trump continued by diving into her greatest economic achievement, which was the Amazon deal. He reminded everyone that Jeff Bezos wanted to build a second headquarters in New York, which would have brought 25,000 jobs to her district. He emphasized that these were 25,000 high-paying tech positions and exactly the kind of work New York is desperate for. He pulled up statistics on the screen showing $27 billion in revenue for New York over the next decade, along with employment growth. He pointed a dramatic finger right at her and said she ran them out of town by attacking the tax incentives offered to bring them there. He noted that she actually claimed that money could have been spent on other things. Trump shook his head in a show of pure theatrical disbelief, stating that is not how tax incentives function. He explained that this is basic economics, and they were not handing Amazon a check, but promising to take a smaller cut of their money if they hired people. He turned back to the crowd with his voice getting louder to say that without Amazon, New York does not see a single dime of those taxes. He pointed out that she turned $27 billion over 10 years into zero, and the worst part is she celebrated it as a victory. The crowd was starting to lose their minds as Trump was completely in his element. He told her she has a degree in economics but clearly does not understand the basics, like unemployment or tax breaks or how a business operates. He leaned over his podium toward her and suggested that maybe she ought to stick to mixing drinks, because economics clearly isn't her strong suit. The whole building erupted while AOC's face turned bright red, and Sean Hannity fought back a smirk. She tried to push back by retreating to her usual talking points about the wealthy elite protecting a system built on exploitation. Trump cut her off with a delighted smirk, saying if she wanted to talk about rich people, they should talk specifically about her. He reached down and grabbed a folder, flipping it open with a flourish to say nothing. Screams champion of the working class like a pair of $580 designer shoes. He brought up the Met Gala in September 2021, and a photo popped up showing AOC in a white gown with tax, the rich emblazoned in red. Trump started reading from his notes like he was assessing a piece of real estate, noting the ticket price was $35,000. He said that amount is more than half of what the average American family earns in a year, all for one party. He looked up at her and asked if she really did not see the irony in wearing that dress to an event filled with billionaires. The audience was laughing so hard that people were literally in tears, but Trump said there was more. He pulled out photos of her luxury apartment building in Washington, D.C., which features every amenity imaginable. He noted the rent is $2,700 a month, which is more than most Americans pay for their entire mortgage. Another picture flashed on the screen showing her Manolo Blahnik shoes worn to a photo op specifically about income inequality with a price tag of $580. He set the photos down and addressed the audience, stating she pulls in $174,000 a year as a congresswoman. He played a clip of AOC in an interview claiming the congressional salary actually makes it hard to afford living in D.C. and that it is a struggle. Trump repeated the word struggle with total disbelief, noting the median household income in the country is $70,000. He pointed out she makes more than double the average and is complaining it is not enough. He walked to the edge of his podium listing the Met Gala ticket and the luxury apartment and the expensive designer heels. He mentioned she drives a Tesla, all while attacking fossil fuels, and declared she is not a socialist, but a champagne socialist. He told her she is just a high-end liberal with a flashier brand who is in the top 10% of earners while pretending she is not. He said she is living in luxury while lecturing working-class folks about how they need to sacrifice more. He shook his head, saying at least he does not hide the fact that he is wealthy, and he actually enjoys being rich. He said he constructed skyscrapers and made a fortune, and is proud of that. But she wears tacks, the rich gowns to galas that cost a fortune. The crowd jumped to their feet in a massive ovation, while AOC looked like she was ready to vanish. Sean Hannity finally tried to take back the reins and move the conversation toward actual policy regarding the Green New Deal. Trump cut in eagerly, whipping out what looked like a calculator to run the math. Alexandria clearly skipped. He stated she cannot tell you where $93 trillion is coming from, but he can tell you it is going straight to nowhere. He gave the calculator a dramatic tap, and noted estimates show the Green New Deal would cost a staggering $93 trillion over a decade. He held up the calculator so everyone could see, and said that breaks down to $600,000 for every single household in America. He asked the crowd if they could afford an extra $600,000. And they roared back, "No," so Trump added that neither can he. He flashed a grin, reminding them he is a billionaire, before pulling some documents up on the big screen. He said the funny part is that when her team released the Green New Deal, they put out an FAQ to explain the details and then wiped it from the internet. He explained they deleted it because people started asking questions they had no answers for. The deleted FAQ flashed on the screen as Trump began reading aloud about economic security for everyone, even those unable or unwilling to work. He emphasized the word unwilling, and the crowd let out a chorus of boos at the idea of cutting checks for people who did not feel like showing up. He read that they set a goal for net zero because they are not sure if they can eliminate farting cows. The room absolutely erupted with laughter, and Trump had to pause to wait for the noise to die down. He snorted and continued reading that they want to build enough high-speed rail so flying on an airplane isn't necessary anymore. He asked her how exactly she plans on getting to Hawaii and if she is going to swim there. Even some of the AOC fans in the room couldn't help but laugh as Trump finally set the paper down. He said he asked his experts how to pay for $93 trillion, and every single economist told him, "You simply cannot." He scanned the audience and said, "It is literally impossible to fund even if you taxed every billionaire at 100%. He turned his gaze directly toward AOC and asked her how she is paying for this and to show the actual numbers. AOC began her response by saying, "We fund it the same way we funded the wars in Iraq." But Trump cut her right off. He demanded specific numbers and asked where the $93 trillion is coming from. But she had no answer. The silence in the room became incredibly awkward. As Trump stated, an answer doesn't exist. He told her she just made the whole thing up and drafted a proposal that looks great in a tweet, but falls apart in the real world. He said she is looking to wipe out millions of jobs and blow $93 trillion based on a plan she has zero ways to fund. He pulled up independent economic studies showing her Green New Deal would be a total catastrophe that sends poverty rates soaring. He stepped to the center of the stage to address her constant references to Nordic countries and Danish socialism. He asked if she knew that the Prime Minister of Denmark explicitly told Bernie Sanders to stop calling them a socialist nation. He explained they have free markets and corporate tax rates that are actually lower than ours. He pointed a finger right at her, stating she does not even understand the very countries she is using as examples. He delivered his final line with flawless timing, saying, "This is not a policy, but a bedtime story, and Americans aren't going to pay for a fairy tale." AOC was visibly shaken but tried to pivot back to her comfort zone by claiming to be a Bronx native who understands the working class. Trump interjected, holding up his hand to tell her to stop, because she is not from the Bronx. He produced property records, stating the narrative works better when the streets aren't in wealthy suburbs. He revealed she was raised in Yorktown Heights, which is in Westchester County, and one of the wealthiest areas in the country. A map flashed on the screen showing Yorktown Heights, where the median home value is nearly $500,000. He turned his gaze toward the audience, explaining, "This is nothing like the Bronx, and not the gritty environment she pretends to represent." Images appeared on the screen showing gorgeous houses and tree-lined streets in high-end suburbs. He noted her father was a successful architect, and her mother worked in real estate while she attended a university costing $60,000 a year. He pivoted to face her directly and said she markets herself as a girl from the streets who beat the odds, but in reality, she grew up in privilege. He stepped closer to her side of the stage and addressed the fact that she spent a couple of years bartending. He said plenty of people work as bartenders, but she acts like she was some oppressed worker struggling to survive. He gave a dismissive shake of his head, noting she had a degree from an elite university and chose to work at a bar while figuring out her career. He stated that isn't a hardship, but just a typical post-grad job search, and that his own kids took on summer jobs. He hammered the contrast home by saying he actually grew up in Queens, and not as some rich kid pretending to be from the Bronx. He said his father built actual apartment complexes, and he spent his summers working construction, so he knows real working life. He pointed his finger directly at her and said she fabricated a whole persona because the girl from the Bronx makes a good story. He called it branding and marketing, like putting an Instagram filter on her entire life story. His voice grew louder as he told her she is not authentic, but rather a product designed for social media. He said she doesn't represent working people, but just uses their struggle while living in luxury and attending expensive events. The crowd erupted in cheers as he declared he has never lied about who he is and is proud of his wealth. He gestured over at her, saying she pretends to be working class when she is clearly not, and claims to be from the Bronx when she is from Westchester. His closing remark was cutting, as he asked who she really is, since she went to a university that costs a fortune. Trump wasn't finished yet, as he turned to a different section of his files to talk about her grandmother in Puerto Rico. AOC's face turned pale because she knew exactly where he was heading with this. He accused her of using her own grandmother for political gain and then turning down help, which he called heartless. He reminded everyone that after Hurricane Maria, she posted all about her grandmother's damaged house and stuck condition. He said she used her relative to attack him and criticized the federal response to score political points. He brought up her tweets on the big screen, showing the posts about the plight of her grandmother. Trump took a brief pause to agree that the hurricane was truly devastating and a sad situation. Then his tone grew much more intense as he asked if she knew what conservatives did when they heard about the struggle. He revealed that they started a fundraiser to help her out, raising over $100,000 of real money from real people. The specific number appeared on the screen, showing over $104,000 raised to help an elderly woman in need. Trump stared directly at AOC and asked if she knew what happened to that money. He stated her office turned it down and refused to let her own grandmother get that help just because it came from conservatives. The audience let out a gasp as the official statement from her office appeared on the screen, declining the funds. Trump's voice reached a crescendo as he asked why she said no and answered that accepting help from opponents would destroy her narrative. He said it would prove that conservatives actually care about people, and she could not have that. He noted with genuine anger that this was her own flesh and blood, yet she blocked the help for political reasons. He turned to the audience to ask if her home ever actually got repaired or if she received any help. He turned back to face AOC once more and answered that she did not receive it. CNBC later blared the headline that markets rallied on the humiliation of AOC as investor confidence shot up. The conservative media machine went into overdrive as Fox News replayed the entire debate 3 separate times within the first 24 hours. Hannity dedicated whole episodes to every point Trump drove home, while Tucker Carlson ran a series on economic basics. Even the mainstream media could not look away, as the viewership numbers were just too massive to ignore. CNN was forced into coverage, with panels looking visibly pained as they failed to spin her performance. MSNBC brought on economists who had to admit Trump was spot on about the price tag of the Green New Deal. The New York Times even ran a fact-check that backed up most of Trump's claims about her lifestyle and the Amazon fiasco. The bartender economics meme blew up everywhere, with viral photos of AOC behind a bar edited with textbooks. Clips of her claiming unemployment is low due to 2 jobs started playing on an endless loop. The Met Gala photo became the ultimate symbol of progressive hypocrisy, showing up in every campaign ad. Suddenly, the decision to kill the Amazon deal looked completely vindicated, and business leaders finally felt they could speak up. The New York Post screamed from the front page that AOC cost the city 25,000 jobs. Local politicians who had kept their heads down started openly calling out her lack of economic understanding. You could see the total collapse just by looking at her social media stats, which flipped to being mostly negative. Not even her most loyal followers could justify taxing the rich while she attended expensive galas. The polls showed just how devastating the fallout really was, as her approval rating in her district tanked to 24%. Nationally, her support among Democrats plummeted, and among independent voters, she dropped to a staggering 11%. When asked if they would support her for higher office, a massive 68% said no. Within a week, a serious primary challenger emerged who was a businesswoman with a real track record of creating jobs. Her launch video was packed with highlights from the debate stage, comparing talk to actual understanding. In her first week of fundraising, the challenger pulled in over $8 million from donors done with the socialist pipe dream. Democratic leadership started making a public exit, with Nancy Pelosi giving a curt response about members speaking for themselves. Chuck Schumer played it safe by refusing to back her specific stances, while moderate Democrats tore into the Green New Deal. Without much fanfare, AOC was quietly stripped of her committee assignments in a move everyone knew was direct punishment. She had officially become political poison due to her lack of economic sense and documented hypocrisy. The influence of the squad crumbled almost overnight, as other members saw their numbers dive just by being in her orbit. Members of the Progressive Caucus started keeping their distance to save themselves. Democratic socialism basically became a national punchline, and tax the rich was now shorthand for hypocrisy. 3 weeks after the debate, even, The Atlantic dropped a brutal piece detailing how she lost the economic argument. The article tore into her confusion over unemployment stats and her failure to explain the funding for her plans. The final verdict was that her performance essentially set the entire movement for progressive economics back by a generation. By failing to hold her ground against Trump and having no plan for her policies, she gave the opposition effective weapons. The article went viral across the political spectrum, shared by conservatives celebrating and progressives trying to understand the failure. Exactly 1 month after the debate, AOC called a press conference to announce she would not seek re-election. She stated she decided to step away to serve the community in other ways, but everyone knew the real story. Trump had effectively ended her political career in just an hour and a half, and the cultural impact reached far beyond one politician. The debate between capitalism and socialism had been settled for good in the American mind. Polling revealed that support for socialist policies among young people plummeted in a single month. Business schools began adding the debate to their programs as a case study for economics and communications. Professors used it to show the gap between theory and practice, and what happens when ideology hits mathematical truth. Harvard Business School developed a full case study on what happens when social media fame meets economic scrutiny. It became required reading in MBA programs as an example of how public image can hide a lack of competence. At Stanford, the economics department used clips from the debate to focus on the breakdown of unemployment claims. One professor noted in his syllabus that this is why economics is a discipline that requires math. 2 months after the debate, Trump held a massive rally in the South Bronx, which was the real Bronx. Over 25,000 people showed up, packing every available inch of the park to see the billionaire capitalist. The crowd was a diverse mix of working-class New Yorkers who had watched their representative get exposed as a fraud. Local news interviewed attendees who were fed up with her representation and the fact she was actually from a wealthy neighborhood. One resident mentioned the lost Amazon jobs that his cousin could have worked, if not for her pipe dream. When Trump finally took the stage, the roar from the crowd was deafening, and he stood there soaking in the energy. He yelled into the microphone that this was the real Bronx and not Westchester. The crowd went wild as he reminded them she told everyone she was from there because it sounded better for her brand. He let the crowd boo before continuing about the debate that over 200 million people watched. He said they went head-to-head on capitalism versus socialism and success versus playing the victim. The crowd began chanting capitalism as Trump smiled and let the chant build before raising his hands. He told them that economics and math and reality happened during that debate. He recalled hitting her with straightforward questions about where the money would come from and why she drove Amazon away. He asked how she justified complaining about her salary and wearing that dress to the gala. He let it sink in that she sat in silence because there simply aren't any answers. He declared that socialism falls apart when you hold it up to basic math and simple logic. The audience was hooked on every syllable as he explained that socialism buckled under the weight of its own absurdity. He announced that she is finished and stepping away for good at only 36 years old. The room went wild with a standing ovation that lasted 7 full minutes as people jumped for joy. He told them it wasn't him who took her down, but rather her own conflicting stories and the math. He waved a hand toward the crowd, saying, "They are going to keep standing up for capitalism and freedom." He shouted that America is not a socialist nation where former bartenders lecture billionaires on the economy. He called America the land of opportunity, where anyone can succeed through hard work and free enterprise. That final line brought the house down as he blessed capitalism and America. This was far more than just a simple debate or a clash between two politicians. It was a battle between experience and ideology, with reality winning so clearly it shifted the landscape. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez represented the dangerous idea that social media fame could replace actual expertise. She stood for the notion that you can bash capitalism while reaping its rewards and living in luxury. Trump shattered that illusion in just 90 minutes, using cold, hard facts and her own words against her. He provided cost breakdowns she could not explain and proof of her economic confusion despite her degree. He exposed the privilege masked as struggle and the constant playing of the victim from a place of wealth. Trump showed the country that you should defend capitalism and call out double standards with confidence. He proved that socialism cannot answer the most basic economic questions, no matter how it is rebranded. It still does not have a way to pay for its promises and requires trashing wealth to chase poverty. AOC thought she could school a billionaire because she had a degree and a social media following. She turned out to be wrong about every single thing because she had never been truly challenged.